Alright, welcome back everyone. So, in this one, I am going to be talking about this really ridiculous tax that Chicago has. But first, I want to talk about some taxes that have gone on in the past. Because I have to make a differential between what the motive or the purpose of the tax is for. Because I'm not entirely against taxation, because this is how we pay for specific things such as social programs and whatnot that actually work, if you can get them to actually work. Most of the time the government fucks that up anyway. But I want to differentiate between what is a tax that has a specific purpose or a tax where it's like, they just kind of do it because either they're trying to control the market and it hurts the consumer more than anything, versus making a tax for something that is supposed to be allocated towards a specific thing. So when we look at these types of taxes, one tax that I don't know if you recall, but there was a tax being pushed, they tried to push it into legislation back somewhere around early 2000s, where they wanted to tax, have a higher tax for soda pop beverages. The main argument that they used in trying to push this specific tax was to fight obesity. However, the tax that they were adding to the soft drinks, to the soda pops, things like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, was not going towards helping the obesity epidemic, as that they were calling it, but really more or less that this tax was going to hurt the consumer. They wanted to, it was ultimately a way to try and control the consumer, what a consumer consumes, by overtaxing it, making it more expensive, thus, therefore, not as appealing to want to buy, as opposed to getting water for free out of the tap. So that being said, that's one type of tax, and that is a tax that I don't agree with, because that hurts the consumer, it penalizes the consumer, and its sole intent is to try and control what the consumer wants to buy. And ultimately that should be up to the consumer, not the populace, and not the government. That is an individual choice, liberty, and freedom that a person has to exercise if they want to eat unhealthy, and that improves their quality of life, their perception of the quality of living. That is their choice. I have no quarrel with that, and I think that that tax is utterly disgusting, because really the government and big corporations are going to gain from that, and the consumer is going to be the one that's being punished. Ultimately, I don't think it will be Coke or Pepsi that will have anything to gain from that either, because their products will be highly overtaxed, as well as sugary foods and fattening foods and whatnot. And not everyone that consumes them is even fat. So it's really an unfair advantage. Then you have the tax that Obama put into place on cigarettes. A lot of people really didn't like this, but I think if you were to take the time to understand the purpose and the meaning behind that type of tax. So he put a tax on tobacco products. That tax was specifically supposed to be allocated towards medical expenses for anyone who caught cancer who got cancer, diagnosed with cancer, as a result of smoking. That is a type of tax that I'm not entirely against, because if it's used in the appropriate manner in which it was designated and allocated for, then if you are a smoker, yes, you're paying a little bit more money for your cigarettes because of the tax rate, but ultimately in the end you'll pay less money because of the amount of health care that you will need to spend money on to treat your cancer will be significantly reduced. That's what the tax is supposed to be allocated for. Now that we have a new thing going on in the White House, I'm not so sure that that tax will be allocated in that specific manner. I can show you a screenshot of how taxes are divvied up right here. And as you can see, a large majority of your tax money goes to defense. A very large portion of it, about 75%, close to 75%, maybe a little under it, but close to 75% of your taxes is allocated to defense. Now, this tax that was presented, the amusement tax, 9%, it's a 9% tax for people who live in Chicago for any form of entertainment. Sony just recently decided that they were going to start taxing PlayStation users in Chicago based on the amusement tax. This tax is not going to fund anybody, nobody's really sustaining damage from video game playing, so you can't argue that point. It's almost like the governor hemorrhaged money, is having a difficult time balancing the ledger, and therefore makes up a bullshit tax so you can shovel money that is allocated towards something completely different because he hasn't figured out how to balance the budget. Maybe it goes to social welfare programs, but we ultimately don't know because they don't tell us what that tax specifically goes to. They just taxize it at a 9% rate. That's really kind of high. And I would understand why anybody would be mad about that because a large majority of the United States do not have a tax that falls in this kind of category or bracket. So first, let's have a look at the Chicago Tribune. PlayStation users in Chicago on Wednesday begin paying a 9% tax on streaming content as the gaming company starts complying with a city levy. The Sony-owned company joins other streaming services, including Spotify, Netflix, and Hulu, in complying with the charge, which took effect 3 years ago. The city's amusement tax, which used to apply mostly to concert and sporting event tickets, was extended to include streaming services in 2015. That includes charges paid for playing games. According to Chicago's finance department, some tech companies have fought the additional 9% charge. Apple filed a lawsuit against the city in August, alleging the tax on its music stream services was illegal and discriminatory. That suit is pending in Cook County Circuit Court. Meanwhile, Apple is not collecting the tax. In 2015, a group of Netflix, Amazon Prime, Spotify, Xbox Live, and Hulu users sued Chicago in Cook County, alleging the tax violates federal law. The judge ruled in the city's favor in May, and the streaming service users appealed the decision. The case is pending in the state appellate court. Bill McCaffrey, a spokesman for the city's law department, said in a statement that the city uniformly enforces the amusement tax. If a business is not collecting the tax where we believe it applies, the city takes the necessary steps and works with the company to ensure compliance with the law. A spokeswoman for PlayStation did not respond to a request for a comment on why the company started collecting the tax now. Alright, so I'm glad we went over that, but RT also had something to say as well, and here's what they had to say. So naturally, Chicago PlayStation users are furious at new city fee, as RT has reported. Some of the reports or some of the complaints, as shown on Twitter, David Lee Matthews, Chicago's 9% cloud tax on streaming services like Netflix and Spotify still faces lawsuits. But at least one company is giving in. Sony PlayStation will start collecting the tax from gamers next week. Lip Girl fan account says an amusement tax. The leftists in Chicago must be getting desperate for cash at this rate. And then good old Dave Rubin tweets out a 9% amusement tax. Absolutely insane. I guess they'd rather you be out on the streets shooting people for real. So naturally, of course, gamers are angry, and they have every right to be. And after reading that, let's see what the Federalist has to say about the tax itself and what it covers. According to the Federalist on Chicago's outraged PlayStation users, which I find most interesting, is they actually talk about what the law actually says. The amusement means, 1, any exhibition, performance, presentation, or show for entertainment purposes, including but not limited to any theatrical, dramatic, musical, or spectacular performance, promotional show, motion picture show, flower, poultry, or animal show, animal act, circus, rodeo, athletic contest, sport, game, or similar exhibition, such as boxing, wrestling, skating, dancing, swimming, racing, or riding on animals or vehicles, baseball, basketball, softball, football, tennis, golf, hockey, track, and field games, bowling or billiard or pool games, Section 2, any entertainment or recreational activity offered for public participation or on a membership or other basis, including but not limited to carnivals, amusement park rides and games, bowling, billiards and pool games, dancing, tennis, racquetball, swimming, weightlifting, bodybuilding, or similar activities. And then part 3, any paid television programming, whether transmitted by wire, cable, fiber optics, laser, microwave, radio, satellite, or similar means. Emphasis added. And also from the Federalist, I'd like to point out that apparently other cities, many cities, have a so-called amusement tax, including cities in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Tennessee, Florida, and Wisconsin. But most states focus on taxing things like arcade games or music venues. The tax imposed in Chicago specifically targets digital media, such as games themselves, or access to participation, such as PlayStation Plus. And by that they mean online gameplay. And then I was also fortunate enough to stumble upon the actual amusement tax, which is, I think it's 7010, something like that, 7010, maybe 7050, I think is what it is. But it is a bill passed by Chicago, and here's what it actually says. Alright, now we're looking at the actual act itself from the cityofchicago.org. It's called Amusement Tax 7510. And Part 1, owners, managers, operators of amusements or places where amusements are conducted, collective tax from patrons for witnessing or participating in amusements. 2, resellers of tickets collect tax on the markup if they paid tax on the face value when they purchase the tickets. And this thing has like all the amusement bill rulings. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just showing amusement tax exemption application for DJs, and they also have an amusement tax exemption application. So what I would suggest to anyone living in Chicago, I will leave the link to all of the articles, but I will also leave the link to this as well, because apparently you can file an exemption application, and I would highly recommend doing that. This seems like an unwarranted tax. I know that was a very short, brief coverage, but if you noticed in there that I did mention, and I showed it to you on the on Chicago.org, or the government site, that you can file for an appeal for this amusement tax. And I would recommend that as many people do so as possible. I will leave the link to that in the description below. So if you would like to go, if you are happen to be a member of Chicago and you don't want to pay this 9% tax, it wouldn't hurt to try to get amended from it. Ultimately, though, I can't say what this tax goes to. I ultimately don't know. I haven't found any reason for the tax. I haven't found anything that the tax is specifically allocated to. So this is really more or less penalizing people for entertainment, or it's almost like saying, well, we know people like entertainment, we know that they'll pay for it, so let's capitalize on it. This is a really dirty political tactic, and it's a tax that I absolutely oppose, and I feel bad for anybody living in Chicago that is a gamer, because ultimately they're penalizing you for being a gamer and wanting to game online. And ultimately, it's something that's going to hurt Sony, because if other companies are fighting it, especially Xbox One, they're more liable to go to Xbox One and play online versus playing on PlayStation and playing on PlayStation Online. So I would have to say to Sony that they should probably really rethink bundling themselves with Chicago's amusement tax. And it seems like a really ridiculous thing to try and tax people over for seeking out entertainment. And as we saw, this entertainment tax has seeped into things like Netflix and Hulu and other various streaming applications, probably even YouTube, I would dare to say. And you notice they talked about microwaves, lasers, and all that. I don't know if you realize this, but if you live in rural areas, that is a lot of the times how you get your internet. So it's almost like they're putting a 9% tax on you having an internet for entertainment, and then charging you for the entertainment on top of it another 9% for any streaming services that you use to get extra entertainment. This is absolutely absurd. And I think, and I hope, that Chicago will come to its senses. Now, Chicago has some interesting troubles going on. If we look at their crime rates, I haven't looked at it personally, but I've seen people talk about it. There's an issue there with crime rates going on in Chicago that they're not really dealing with. And I would think that that would be something that needs to be dealt with over a 9% tax on entertainment. And as Dave Rubin pointed out, and I disagree with the comment of Dave Rubin because I think it kind of portrays gamers in a negative light. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's the way that I kind of see it. I don't think it's intentional, but I really would rather stray away from putting gamers in a negative light, that they would do such a thing. There's ultimately no evidence for that, and that's been proven time and time again. But, well, there's really no but to it. The interesting part of that is that with Chicago's crime rates the way that it is, and putting an entertainment tax in place, so instead of going and seeking things out that entertain people and give them something to do, it will probably contribute to the amount of people that are on the streets looking for something to do that don't cost them 9% in a 9% tax rate. Which is where you'll find teenagers and kids playing out in the streets. And I mean, I suppose the 9% tax isn't going to stop that, but it's certainly not helping. It could make getting rid of it, I don't think will stop it, is what I'm saying. But putting that tax in place isn't going to help. It seems like it would perpetuate the problem even further. And that is a correlation. It's not causality, but I think that there's a very strong correlation there, enough to actually make a case against it. That especially if you're looking at families that live in poverty, if it's cheaper for them to afford entertainment, to engage in escapism, it would be much better to engage in escapism via video games than going out on the street and taking out their aggression on other people or engaging in illegal activity. That's what I would think, because illegal activity, entertainment on the street, doesn't have a tax at all. And that's something to be considered. So I really disagree with this tax, and I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention of what was going on, because I don't think this is something that has gotten a lot of coverage in media at all. And it's something that I wanted to bring to people's attention. So like I said, if you are a Chicago resident, there is an amendment you can file to get out of it, to get out of paying this 9% in amusement or entertainment tax. And if you can apply for it, and it can apply to you, I would recommend doing it, because this penalizes the consumer and does nothing for Sony, does nothing for Hulu or Netflix. And we don't even know what that tax is allocated towards. We don't even know if it's for something good. We don't know. And I would say to the governor, you need to learn how to balance your bills better. If you can't figure out how to fund different aspects to your city without taxing people for trying to be entertained. That is absolutely absurd. It is ridiculous on a massive fucking level. You know, I live in a state, the only state where they have a specialized tax dedicated solely for grocery shopping. It goes beyond sales tax. It is a sales tax and then a grocery tax. And even the Republicans in this state wanted to vote the Republican out who put that in place, and put a libertarian in because they were so sick of it. So the governor of Chicago might want to keep that in mind, that eventually people will get tired of it. And I have a strange suspicion that the person in charge, the governor of Chicago, is probably somehow, I have this very strange hunch, I haven't looked into it, I don't know for sure, haven't cared to look into it, probably something I should care to look into, but I have a strange feeling he's probably got a D next to his name, and he's probably a corporate Democrat. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to. And with that, I'm out.